Right. Welcome to Action, episode 90 Action. Episode 21 of season three. This is Jim Weglars, aka Wegs. You can follow me at Wegspool on Twitter and Instagram.
And I'm Steve Roberts, aka Action. You can follow me on Twitter at 31S Roberts.
Follow the podcast at the Side Action Pod on Twitter and YouTube. As on my shirt and my glass again, I'm really promoting this action. Plus,
All
I got
right.
the Millionaire Maker hat on here, which this is $1,000 hat. I'll have you know from year one.
Very expensive and,
Vintage condition though.
and valuable, I might add.
You've got yours in the background for our YouTube viewers. It's on his famous shelf with the Yetis, promoting Yeti. They are not a sponsor yet, but they will be soon. Uh, hey, let's go over some stuff here. You've got some interesting information on the top here. I didn't even get to review this. So is this from last week or is this from this week?
Oh, yeah. I just figured I would touch on my whirlwind week of opening accounts all across America.
Yeah.
I think like we mentioned last week, there's 9 new operators that opened here in Michigan starting on Friday at noon. And
Nice.
I've been peppered with emails, and I think every advertisement on the television is a sports book. So um, I've got about 6 new accounts, Wegs. I have not dived into Bet Rivers yet, but I
Okay.
have some of the more typical ones, FanDuel and DraftKings and
Nice.
BetMGM. I even got a Twin Spires account, which is interesting to me because it's like a horse racing Lexington bred account. So that's
Nice.
interesting.
Yeah. So I got a question for you. So do any of those like the FanDuel or something else that are in another state, did you have something in Indiana with FanDuel? Is
Yeah,
it the same? How does it work? Is it the same app or is it a different login or how does it work?
that's a great question. Actually, 2 different versions. I've got
Okay.
BetMGM Indiana and FanDuel, and they both handle it differently.
Uh,
BetMGM is a completely different app and a separate account. I thought that I would be able to just use my funds in either place wherever I happen to be, but
right.
that's not the case. I have an Indiana account with funds, and then I have a separate Michigan account with funds.
Hmm.
So that's a little bit crappy because now I have these funds that are locked up in Indiana, which eventually next time I get there, I'll probably just withdraw. And then on the other side, FanDuel did it the complete opposite way. It's one app. I just log in and it automatically recognizes I'm in Michigan. And I
Oh, nice.
had access to all my same funds that were in there from the Indiana side. So
Hmm.
that's nice. Much preferred.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder if the Rivers is like MGM. It probably is because it's tied to a physical casino,
Sure.
right? Because there's an MGM in Indiana. Is that the way it worked?
No, I don't think so, actually. They may have a quasi
Hmm.
brick and mortar somewhere, but none that I'm familiar with, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
And FanDuel is tied with Motor City Casino here in Detroit,
Okay.
so they do have
Right.
their brick and mortar through that outfit.
Nice. Well, at least you
So
got your outs now, action. I know you need a
yeah,
minimum of 6 outs. You got it. You can't live without six, you know?
I haven't counted, but I got to be up near double digits now.
I know. Well, I'd be curious at some point, maybe in a slower week, we can I would just be curious to see the different, whether it's a VIG or, we haven't
Mhm.
talked about this stuff in a while on our podcast, but the first year we talked a lot about, what that means to have a different out, and I know, for example, in Vegas, the famous South Point Casino, those guys always stay at minus 110. It's always minus
Mhm.
110. They move the line. Whereas if you look at Rivers or other places where I'm betting, you bet online, they'll move the VIG so it might be a heavier, let's say it's 3 points, like we'll talk about the Chiefs later, but let's say the Chiefs are favored by 3, they won't move the line, they'll just move the VIG a little bit. It might be minus 120 until they move it to, 3.5, for example.
Mhm.
Or if they're trying to get you to bet, they might even give you a plus on one side to try to entice you to bet on the one side. So I'd just be curious with all those outs. What I know that in the old days, 2 years ago, with five dimes was really cheap on the vig, right?
Yeah.
And I know you like to bet there, but I'm just curious what how they'd handle it differently. Just,
Yeah, I mean, you definitely see that different shops have different methodology, just like you mentioned, BetMGM and FanDuel jump out in my mind just in the last 6 days of going a little bit pricey on the VIG. Sometimes you see minus 115 or 120s that are prevalent. And as you and I have talked before, I've learned that I would almost rather steer clear of a minus 120 price and even take a worse half point
Right.
to open myself up to a push in college basketball totals, for example, where a half
Sure.
point to me is not worth 10 cents.
Right.
So having more outs definitely allows me to not pay that hefty price more often than not.
Right. Absolutely. More on me paying heavy prices later. So you had another note about Michigan athletics in general on pause. I don't know if that's just the Wolverine basketball team, or are you talking about all athletics?
Um, well, coincidentally, Michigan State is coming back from a pause tonight at Rutgers, but
Mm-hmm.
Michigan, I don't know if you saw in the news in Washtenaw County, where Ann Arbor is located, there's been several cases of the variant, one of the variants, I don't know.
Sure.
And
Right.
so they preemptively decided at Michigan to shut down all athletic programs earlier this week for 2 weeks, and
Sure.
that includes the basketball team. So I was thinking about that time, looking at some futures prices on Michigan because they have been playing phenomenal basketball lately.
Yeah.
And I have them third ranked in my index. And I'd like to get a little bit of piece of them for a national championship. And I
Hmm.
thought to myself after seeing the news report that I should wait because there are pretty good chances that they'll drop out of the national consciousness and maybe drift a bit on the odds boards between now and the end of their uh, respite.
Sure. Sure. I gotcha. Well, incidentally, back into the personal side, I don't know if I mentioned all this stuff. I had a crazy last week, and part of it was a COVID scare. I don't know if I told
Oh
you.
no.
Yeah, yeah. I had gone out with somebody, on the date, the drive-in, which I may have mentioned last week. And turns out I hadn't heard from her all week. I was like, boy, this girl's ghosting me. Must be bad. I must have been really bad on that date. And then she hits me up Friday morning and she's like, hey, sorry, I've been sick. Test positive for COVID. You better check yourself out. And I was like, oh, shit. So, and I had not gotten a COVID test ever, in the 9 or 10 months, whatever we've been sequestered here. So I did the whole drive through and all that stuff. Thought it was a rapid test and it wasn't. So then I had to kind of forego playing volleyball and I had skate ribbon tickets for Saturday night and all this other stuff. I was all bummed. Turns out totally got negative results, which is awesome.
All right.
Hopefully I'm just immune to, I either have the antibodies or I'm immune to COVID, but she's still sick. She's been sick even into this week, but she's still talking to me, so that's good. But anyway, yeah, that was kind of wild. It was a wild few days there. I had to stay in, and of course in Chicago they just opened up indoor dining again at 25%, like the day I had to stay in, and I was like, damn it. Plus, like I said, the indoor volleyball, we were playing beach sand volleyball, which I'll play tomorrow and Saturday, so I'll be fine. But anyway, COVID's everywhere, dude. It's a wild time. It's a
Yeah.
wild time.
So if you pick it up on a date night like that, does it automatically classify as an STD or is it still in a completely different category?
Well, it's funny you should say that. We'll make this. We'll talk about sports later. I was talking about. I think that's something that not that this comes up on a first date, but the idea of hey, have you gotten STDs tests? Recently, it's all about COVID tests. So whether it's STD or not, whether you consider it STD, COVID, it certainly is something that's a topic of conversation. And so I guess now I should get an antibodies test to see if I'm like, hey, I could beat COVID anytime. But I told her, I'm like, hey, look at it this way. In a couple weeks, you'll have had it, you're through it, and then I'm probably immune if I was around you that whole day. So
There
we're
you go.
good. So, but anyway, yeah, absolutely. It's COVID is the next STD. What can you say? So.
Well, that sounds like fodder for a future Wegs dating blog post.
Yeah, there may be a post on there, buddy. There may be a post for sure. I've got one in the couple in the hopper here that I got to get out. So, all right. Well, let's get back to the main podcast, and everybody's loving that part, probably more than this. But anyway, let's get into the recaps of the championship Sunday. Some huge games. It was epic, definitely on both sides going in. The first game was definitely the better game. I put Brady best Rodgers. I mean, for those that watched it. Yeah, obviously Brady versus Rodgers. Brady's going in with Tampa. He can make his 10th Super Bowl. You got Rodgers, who hasn't played in the championship game in his home stadium, and what happens? Pretty good game in the first half, but I mean, Tampa to me won this game on 3 plays. I'm not saying they could have come back. I mean, Green Bay could have come back, but at the end of the half, the Bucs had done a pretty good job early of moving the ball in Green Bay and scoring, but they were just kind of running out the clock almost. But they ended up going for it on fourth down late in the first half and getting the first down. And it appeared that they were just going to go for field goals. They only had like 7 seconds or whatever it was left on the clock. And little Scotty Miller beats Kevin King deep, and Brady throws a dime to put him up at the end of the half, 21-10. I mean, that was a death blow to that team. And then when they come out of the half, Green Bay's got the ball. They got to score. First play, bam, fumble down to the 2. Now they're down 28-10. Now, granted, the rest of the game was a little bit different script. They got Brady to throw some interceptions. They got back in it, had a chance to really tie or win, tie the game late. We can talk about that in a minute. But wow, I mean, in the end, Green Bay loses the game outright, 31-26. So the Bucs cover the 3, and obviously it goes over the total with all those turnovers and stuff. But Brady reaches his 10th Super Bowl, and Rodgers is now talking about maybe leaving Green Bay. What do you think of that game?
Yeah, just a wild game. I am a little disappointed, and mostly because I had a Packers ticket.
Of course you did.
But I was just disappointed in the way that the Packers offensive line played. I think we talked about it. We were texting on Sunday, and it seemed like the Bucs were just in Rodgers' face all day. Jason Pierre-Paul had a great game, and the pressure on Rodgers in the end was just too much for them, and they couldn't quite move the ball. I mean, they still ended up with a ton of yards, 346 passing yards from Rodgers, but it was their red zone offense too that held them down. You mentioned it earlier in the late fourth quarter when they had an opportunity to tie the game. They decided to forego the fourth down play and kick the field goal, and certainly wait a little bit of a white flag there. What's your take on the fourth down play?
Well, I've heard a lot of analysis about it this week, of course. I do think the point that I've heard that makes the most sense was that, I mean, it was first and goal from like the 7, right? And they were trying to go for the touchdown, of course, on the first 3 downs. But, I mean, to me, it was like, if you're going to go for fourth down or going to try to go for fourth down, you don't have to get all the 7 yards. I mean, you could run or do a quick, an out or something. And then obviously Rodgers, he made a mistake. He should have run the ball on, I think it was 3rd down. He should have run the ball, tried to score, at least would have gotten a couple of yards, and maybe they would have gone for the fourth down. I think they definitely should have gone for fourth down, though. I mean, given the situation, if you miss it, then at least the Bucs are backed up. In the same situation. Because if you kick the field goal, sure, you're within the score now. You're not down 8, but you still need the ball back to win. It doesn't change the dynamic. So it was interesting for a young coach like LaFleur to make that decision. I got to think the analytics were against him kicking the field goal. And then he chose to do it. Again, now granted, they did pick off Brady 3 times in the second half, which is usually that's a loser for the Bucs.
Oh, yeah.
But what they did again, I think that, Brady was masterful. I'm not a huge Brady guy, but he's the best. There's no question. He's the GOAT. But going for on first down, throwing that 9-yard out right away, they were expecting the run, right? And they just boom. So those plays, those really smart plays, getting that first down, getting that Scotty Miller touchdown, getting that first down and 9, getting that 9 yards on first. I mean, he outplayed and they outcoached, Green Bay for sure.
Yeah. The Aaron Jones fumble right out of the halftime was huge too. Add that one in there.
Yeah.
And again, another game where the Bucs were really aided by turnovers by their opponent. So I'm going to say it. We'll get to the Super Bowl analysis later, but I'm just not sure that Tampa Bay is the team that they are based on these outcomes recently.
Yeah. Well, I'll leave some comments for later, but yes, let's go to the next game. All right, so the next game was the Chiefs. I just put the Chiefs are cut above. I mean, Mahomes, coming in. Oh, he's got this nerve thing, his foot. Can he run around? And the Bills came out hot. They really should have scored a touchdown early, got a field goal. Then they get McCole Hardman made a bad play, fumbling the ball. They get an early touchdown. They're up 9-0. Of course, it's like the Chiefs of last year, falling down early. But after that, see you later. I mean, the Chiefs eviscerated the Bills defense, which was not surprising. But the fact that Kelsey and Hill got all the yards, 290 receiving yards out of 325 passing yards, those are the two guys you have to stop. And in the end, I mean, it was just a track meet that the Bills couldn't run. And I think Josh Allen, he's going to learn. I love him. Hopefully he'll be better next year. He was making some bad throws where they didn't pick the ball off early. And they end up, Chiefs win 38-24. So this game also goes over. But the Chiefs finally cover a game. And now Mahomes is the second Super Bowl at 25 years old, which is the youngest of any player. So it's incredible.
Yeah, if there's anyone that can ever rival Tom Brady's masterful Super Bowl record, it might be Mahomes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, just trying to get out of my apps as quickly as possible when they got down 9-0, because just like last year in the playoffs, you just had a feeling that the Chiefs were going to come back and win this football game. And they did so in flying fashion. Mahomes was just incredible. They were getting a little bit of a pass rush on him.
Sure.
And I think it was in the early third quarter on consecutive plays, Mahomes just totally deked the oncoming rusher and then threw like a 30-yard bomb twice in a row. So even if the Bucs are able to get some pressure on him, I think Mahomes, given 2 more weeks of rest and relaxation, you got to imagine that his toe is going to be better. And he'll probably have a little bit more ability to run in the Super Bowl as well, which is just going to make this offense even more dynamic.
Right.
And it must be said, though, the Mahomes rushing prop under, and Josh Allen with 88 rushing yards of his own.
Right.
He didn't play awful. I mean, the Bills were certainly better than I expected.
Yeah, they just, the thing is, and I may have written this in there, the one thing the Chiefs did, though, they stopped the run. They didn't stop Josh Allen. He had 88 yards rushing. Some of that was planned, some of it was scrambles. I mean, with the running backs, they had 41 yards. I mean, they just stuffed the run. So they made Josh Allen beat him, and he couldn't. And as good as he's been, as good as Diggs has been, obviously, I don't know if you heard the report that Cole Beasley, which, of course, on the reports never said this, he actually had a broken bone in his fibula. Okay, got it, or tibia or something. So he had a cracked tibia. He's playing on a cracked tibia. So they weren't 100%. But, hey, this team played great. They had an incredible season. They're going to be back. They're young. They got a young receiving core. They got a young quarterback. Unfortunately, they're in the AFC, so they're going to need the Chiefs to take a step back. But, yeah, it was incredible season for them. What I was going to say, to get back to that point about the VIG, is that, I mean, I'm glad I got good numbers going in. I think said last week I had the Chiefs at, -2.5 and the Bucs at +4. But I paid extra for that, right? I mean, obviously I won those bets, but in the end, neither of those bets came in, but I paid the extra VIG, probably wasn't worth it, right? It might have been worth just to let it go to 3.5, drop down on the one side or 3 on the other, and have been okay. I ended up losing my totals bets, of course, as usual.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, it only costs you when you lose, right?
Yeah.
So as long as you're on the right side, it's not an issue, but it's in the long term where it begins to add up.
It does.
So still a profitable weekend, though, for you, right?
Yeah, I made money. I mean, not a ton, because the thing is like when I do those totals, I'm like, about the same, so basically it's, usually it's just 4 units or whatever. So I usually pay the VIG back, or I usually, Rivers gives me these little bonuses. So I get, I kind of pay less. So usually really it's a break even weekend. Hopefully I'll be more profitable in the Super Bowl. So let's go into the Super Bowl a little bit, just an early preview, America. We're just going to talk generally about the numbers. We'll go deeper next week, but just to give you an idea of what's going on, let's cover, I guess now the spread is 3, right? Kansas City -3. Is that what you're seeing for the most part?
Just pulling up the odds screen here. I can tell you, I think there's a few 3.5s out there in America, both domestic and offshore, but also some 3s that are a little juiced to the Kansas City side.
Right. And then the total is around 56 and a half. I don't know if it's going up or down, but one thing I've heard is that for the most part, this is going to be the spread. You're not going to see massive movement
Mhm.
here. And it makes sense because the teams are good, but even the three, I'm surprised you're seeing 3.5. I had 3.5 on the board originally, but it got quickly bet down to three. And what's interesting to me is that even if the Chiefs are a prohibitive favorite, like in the money line world, you know what I mean? They're not going to match up to one another. What I
Mhm.
understand for the Super Bowl, the spread and the money line will not equate to a normal week because so many people just bet the money line.
Sure.
So it's kind of a unique situation when you're doing Super Bowl betting.
Hmm.
One of the things I wanted to mention, there's a couple big injuries we got to talk about, especially on the Chiefs side. You've got left tackle Eric Fisher. He tore his Achilles in that game against the Bills. He's out obviously indefinitely, for next year. Hopefully he comes back. So that's a huge one. They're going to be juggling their offensive line again, because I think their right tackle is also a replacement guy. So it's been, a patchwork situation. Some questionable guys, Le'Veon Bell, who didn't play in the championship game, he has a knee issue. He's questionable. William Gay, the linebacker, he has an ankle injury. Sammy Watkins, he's back on there with his calf, and L'Jarius Sneed, the cornerback, is in the concussion protocol. On the Bucs side, you've got Antonio Brown, who didn't play in the championship game with his knee is questionable. But here's the two guys that I'm interested in
Hmm.
finding out about. Antoine Winfield, the strong safety, his ankle, he's questionable, and Jordan Whitehead, the free safety, his shoulder, he's questionable. I understand that I think it's Whitehead that may not play, right? It's one of them's not as good as the other, and those guys, they definitely need those guys against Hill and the gang. So I just had some topics here, action. I mean, general ideas. I mean, we've talked about the Brady Mahomes matchup before in past years. Now you've got him. It's maybe a rematch game for Mahomes. He can get revenge. They're both 2-2 against each other, but in the playoffs, Brady took them out 2 years ago.
Yeah, that was with Bill Belichick on the
Yes, it
defensive
was.
side of the ball, though. And I think that the Chiefs' offense might be a little bit different version of itself too this time around.
Yes.
So certainly a matchup for the ages, Mahomes versus Brady, kind of like a passing of the torch game. Although
Hmm.
I don't think Brady is ready to pass any torches.
He
And
wasn't the Rodgers.
I have full expectation Brady will be back next year, regardless of the outcome of this game.
Yeah.
But I'm leaning to the Chiefs.
Hmm.
I already snapped up the Chiefs -3 at -110 on top
That's
of
good.
our. I think we both have Super Bowl futures on the
We
Chiefs,
do. We do.
which we'll need to talk about at some point.
Hmm.
But I definitely like the Chiefs in this game. You mentioned the money line earlier.
Hmm.
You also find in Super Bowls, I think you're alluding to this, that a lot of public bettors will just line up and give me the underdog and the money line because
Right.
they see that plus value and
Sure.
they see some value there. And you actually might find some value on the other side with the Chiefs if you wait until game time
Hmm.
because that may come down a little bit from its current number, about 165 at the moment.
Right. 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 Yeah, well, I'll talk about my lean in a minute, but I was going to cover these other ones. So what about the home field? I mean, this is kind of weird. I haven't heard any reports yet. I'm assuming they're going to let some fans in Tampa, if not a
Mhm.
lot, because Florida is the Wild West down there. But I mean, we haven't seen home field advantage all season. I can't, usually Super Bowls aren't about home field, but it is one of the rare times, if ever, that a team is hosting the Super Bowl and they're playing in their hometown.
Yeah, I think the first time ever.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And there is expected about 20,000 fans.
Okay.
And I think there's some number, whether it's 6,000 comes to mind, they're giving to frontline healthcare workers
Okay.
from across the country, not just Tampa workers. And I do think that there's going to be some Tampa fans there, but to be honest with you, I am not really allocating any advantage to home field in this matchup.
Okay.
It's your standard 2 week time frame turnaround, so there's no real travel advantage or non-travel in the case of the
Right.
Bucks. And I just don't really expect there to be an inordinate amount of Bucks fans in attendance. In fact, I've read reports that ticket prices are going to be the highest in history because of
Oh,
the
wow.
reduced amount.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I did hear that there's travel restrictions for this, so I think the Chiefs, they are allowed to come in on maybe Friday. It's not a normal
Oh,
junket like you
okay.
would normally
Okay.
have where they would show up like the week before and there's just, you know, whatever reporter row. It's not going to be like that this year. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be a much more truncated time frame. They could actually come in the night before if they wanted to. So it's kind of like a normal road game for Kansas City. So maybe that's, maybe it is no advantage, like you said. Just a note, I kind of found this interesting. So the Buccaneers now are they're the first true wild card to get to the Super Bowl, right? Since
Wow.
2010. And that was the Packers who did that, and they actually won the Super Bowl. It is, it's just a weird stat, but it is very rare to have a real road, basically a team who's gone on the road the whole time except for the Super Bowl and play and get in there. So it's unique. I was thinking this is one of the angles I kind of wanted to talk about. We could talk more about it next week. Is that
Mm-hmm.
in the first matchup, the Bucks tried to do what they do. It's bump and run coverage. It's a lot of blitz heavy schemes, and they got lit up. I mean, Tyreek Hill had 200 yards in the first half, first quarter, and Mahomes had over whatever, almost 400 yards passing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they're going to change strategy? Or are they just going to try to do it better?
Well, I mean, I was listening to a little bit of a media podcast earlier this week that suggested that the Bucks defensive coordinator, and his name is escaping me.
Todd Bowles?
Yeah, Bowles, thank you, is typically reluctant to change his game plans.
It's true.
And he sticks to his old tried and true, and he thinks that his defense works,
Hmm.
and he is likely going to play the same in the Super Bowl. And I, for one, think, like you, that is probably going to be a mistake given the
Right.
outcome in the first meeting.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see if Bowles comes up with something new for the Chiefs in this game. You got to figure with the 2 weeks, he may be able to, but the question is if he has sets his ego aside to do so.
Right. Right. Well, I will tell you, action, that the Wegs index, which is usually 65 to 70% accurate in the playoffs, even against the spread, is on the Bucks. The Bucks are
Oh,
higher rated, and it's because of the defense, and not necessarily the turnovers. This does not factor in the playoff run. It's just the regular season,
mm-hmm.
and really on the field. What I was going to say earlier when you're talking about the turnovers. What I've noticed about the Bucks in at least the last two games, not against Washington, but against the last two games, they've come out and been the aggressor. They've been
Mm-hmm.
way more physical than the other team. And the Chiefs aren't exactly that type of physical team, right? They're more of a speed merchant group. I do think the way that they call the game makes a difference, and it's true that they've against the Saints and against the Packers, they get away with holds all the time. I mean, they're
Yeah.
playing this bump run coverage, they're pulling jerseys, and Devin White's playing at another level, obviously. So that's why that they're higher rated. I haven't been able to get myself to bet that. But I would have been profitable if I just stuck to the index in the playoffs most of the time. So, but anyway, as you said, we'll discuss a little more strategy next week, a little more deeper. But it's just interesting how, like on paper, the two best teams. I think I told you it was the Bucks and the Saints. Those were the two best teams, and those teams in the end, Saints should have beat them, right?
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
Saints are better. But anyway, the last thing I just was going to say is just we'll figure it out. But I mean, are the Chiefs just better? We had talked about this last week. If the Chiefs play their game, they beat everybody. It's just
Mm-hmm.
whether they play down to the competition, let the team hang around, and then, or just take their foot off the gas pedal. And last week, for the first time in a long time, they didn't. And if they can do that against the Bucks, they should win, right? That's the working theory.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. They straight up dominated the Bucks in the first meeting. I think
Hmm.
they were up by 20 points at halftime, and I
Yep.
think it was the Chiefs really just taking their foot off the gas in the second half that allowed the Bucks to get back into the back door in that game. They ended up covering with a
They
late
did.
touchdown, three, and the spread was 3.5. So I don't think that the Chiefs are going to make that mistake this time, and
Right.
I've got that future, and I would like to get some more money down on them somehow if I can. Already
Mhm.
laid three, I mentioned, but maybe the props are the way to attack it.
Yeah, yeah, that could be. And the last note I didn't even put on the outline is the Bucks, their last loss was against the Chiefs this year. So that's the last time they've lost, and that was in week 12. So
Wow,
they've been on a run. They've been on a run for sure. So
no doubt.
all right, let's go into hoops. Second half of the podcast here. So we'll just kind of go over the index and then our picks from last week, and then some games we like this week. It doesn't look like a lot of changes on the action index here. Action. I don't know. Is there anything of note that we should be looking at here?
No real changes. In fact, I don't think that any one team shuffled. Florida State
Yep.
may have jumped into the top 10 from last week. And I
Yep.
think they flip-flopped with Texas Tech after their loss at West Virginia.
Mhm.
And, it's worth mentioning again that Gonzaga and Baylor are now 7 points clear in my ratings above third place Michigan.
Right, but you still don't have any futures on those teams yet, right?
No, I sure don't. And I've looked, their odds are
It's
lower
too
than
heavy.
10. It's just gotten away from me. I don't really think there's any value in taking a 800 price on either of these teams.
Right, right. You did say that you like, I think it was Alabama last week. You were
Mhm.
kind of on for a Final Four bid. I'm looking at teams now. I'm starting to do more analysis, and there's some teams I like. I do like Florida State. I always do. Leonard
Yeah.
Hamilton, I've talked about him before. I mean, he just has a great brand of basketball, and the ACC to me is a little weak this year.
Yep.
So they're going to have a good path to get at least a top two seed. Maybe it'll be a three seed, but we'll see how it shakes out. Um,
One
okay, well, let's
team,
go into our
one
last.
team that's been rising in my perception too, not in the top 10 here, but Virginia at 12
Yes.
started out a little slow in conference play, and the last couple of games have really picked up their game, both defensively and on the offensive end.
Well, that
So,
team can score the basketball now.
yeah,
That's what I was going to say about the West Virginia Texas Tech game. I was shocked at the total.
yeah,
This team's both got over 80. It was incredible, and that's the thing about Virginia. They're still playing their brand of basketball, but they're scoring. It's what's his name?
Hauser.
Sam
Yeah.
Hauser, right? Hauser, and then I watched the highlights when they played Syracuse earlier this week, and it was just, I mean, alley-oop dunks against the zone all day, but also open jumpers. So that team's going to be really good. To me, in the ACC, you've got Florida State and you've got Virginia, and that's
Yeah.
pretty much it. I'm sure there's other teams that are. I mean, North Carolina's getting better. Duke is struggling. It's going to be those two teams that are duking it out. Sorry, figuratively, and and so It's interesting. I do think the strength is in other conferences this year. We talked about that Big Ten, Big 12, and then obviously the Zags are out there. And SEC
Yeah.
has some good teams too. Well,
True.
let's look. Last week we just have to toot our own horn. We kicked ass last week. Action.
Oh,
We
yeah.
went 4-1 in our picks. Michigan covered against Purdue. We just talked about Florida State, who destroyed Clemson. The only miss was Wisconsin against Ohio State, and then we got Rutgers as well, and Indiana, and then the West Virginia pick. We listed it actually as they were going to be a favorite by one at home, but they ended up being the dog 1.5, and that was when I thought we were on the same. I'm sorry, Action. I thought we were. I misunderstood your text when I delete my text and I'm like, "Hey, buddy, we got the win." And he's like, "Well, actually, I got -2." I'm like, "Oh, I got +1.5. Sorry." But anyway, it was an exciting game.
Yeah, I thought I was getting out in front of that, the night before, saw West
Right,
Virginia -2 and laid it. And unfortunately, that number went the other direction on me. So it
right.
happens.
But with Tech, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot with these things. I should put them in the outline. Who's the shooter for Tech? They got a guy who can really score the ball.
Mac McClung,
That's
former
right.
Georgetown Hoya transfer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he can light it up. He had a hell of a game against West Virginia. But West Virginia's got a closer on that team. They got a guy who can score, and drive the ball to the cup. And what was that guy's name? That dude was scoring it late in that game.
Culver's brother, I think, is
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, let's take a look at some of the games this week. We always like to put in the Friday night action because that's Action's favorite, and it's usually Big Ten basketball. So we've got Illinois going to, or actually hosting Iowa, and I know this is probably against your index and all, but but I like Illinois. They've actually lost 2 of 3 games at home, but I just love this matchup. Kofi Coburn against Garza. Garza is a hell of a ball player, but Kofi's just a beast, and I really like their physicality. They can score with the Hawkeyes. Certainly that they're better in your index, and they're also better in Ken Palm. But 1.5's a short favorite at home, so I'm hoping that Illinois will take them down tomorrow night.
Yeah. I was actually looking at this game and certainly eyeballing it's an incredible matchup. These were probably
Mhm.
the two top teams in the preseason Big Ten rankings, and Garza versus Coburn is going to be awesome. I cannot wait to watch it. And
Right.
I'm with you. I laid the points with Illinois here. I'm showing that Iowa is like half a point better
Okay.
than the Illinois Fighting Illini, and the Fighting Illini are just beasts on the boards.
Right.
32nd ranked offensive rebounding, and the other advantage where I think they're going to have in this game is at the 3 point line. They are a great 3 point shooting team, and Iowa not so great defensively there. So I do expect that Io, DeSumo, and company will get some threes off, and hopefully they'll make enough of them to win this game. Going to be fireworks, though. I've got the total projected at 153. I'm not sure what it opened up at, but there's going to be a lot of points in this one.
Right. Right. For sure. For sure.
The only thing I'll add, and this is the spot for it, I meant to mention it earlier in the outline, but I've been monitoring and texting my dad and brothers every night that Big Ten road teams are on an incredible tear against
I
the
know
spread.
you've mentioned it before.
Last night, two more victories by road teams, and I think there was a couple more before that over the weekend on Saturday and Sunday. And I put it down as a homework assignment. Next week, America, I'm going to go back and check every Big Ten game and figure out what the exact number is against the spread for road
Yeah.
teams
Let's
because I
figure it
think it's
out.
an advantage.
I agree. You said that before. You don't have the fans, the rabid fans that you normally would in a Big Ten setting, and so yeah, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure it's kind of like the NFL, not as much an
Mhm.
advantage for home court anymore.
Yeah,
You've got two more Friday night action spots. I like this action. You're coming back here. I don't know if I put this or you did, but St. Louis, who actually lost to Dayton the other night, they're back in action at Richmond. St. Louis must have had a major COVID situation because they didn't play for weeks. So they're back. They didn't play great against Dayton on the road. Now they're going to Richmond. You're showing them as a 1.5 point dog on the road, but you like St. Louis in this matchup?
I do. Yeah, this Billikens team is one of my favorites. And before the COVID scare, they started out super hot, 7-0 against the spread.
Hmm.
And in fact, I think it was much more than a scare. I read that like almost their entire team got sick with the virus. So
Right.
they were off for over a month and just returned to play. And they really kind of got beat down by Dayton in
They
that
did.
game. I was on the Dayton side myself, but despite that, I think that a couple more days of practice here this week and getting back into the gym, they'll be rounding into form. And I was shocked to see them open up as an underdog. That's an actual line. I've got St. Louis as 6 points better than Richmond. So I'm definitely going to take it with the Billikens.
There you go. There you go. This next one I'm not as excited about. Actually, I don't like it at
I
all,
put it
but
on there for you.
I know you did. So this one is Boise State at Colorado State. They play Friday now. Colorado State beat Boise last night, right?
Correct.
So I'm assuming this is your zigzag theory where Boise is on the road at Colorado State. They're getting 1 point. You're thinking it's a zigzag back to the Broncos?
Hmm. I do. Last night, Wegs, you may recall that Colorado State was actually a 3.5 point underdog in this matchup,
They were.
and they came out and put a good game on Boise and won the game. Um, but despite that, I think that Boise is still the class of this conference.
Okay.
They are winning a lot of basketball games, and they're going to have a pretty significant edge on the backboards, which did not come to fruition last night because Colorado State made a lot of shots.
They did.
So I'm playing the zigzag theory here, and I do like Boise State here. Again, I can't believe that they opened up as an underdog in this one. I
All
took
right.
Boise State +1 for tomorrow night, looking to bounce back.
Hey man, they're going into Moby Arena. Nobody survives Moby.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I see what you're saying. I mean, both these teams are really good in this conference. I think you're probably right that what I've seen, at least even when Colorado State played San Diego State, who's better in
Mhm.
metrics but aren't doing as great in the record department, they split. So this is very common where these teams split. So I don't think it's a bad take, action, even though it's against my Rams. Let's go into
Fair.
the Saturday matchups. We've got a couple big ones in the SEC Big 12 Challenge, which happens every year. I'm glad that they're still doing it. Alabama at Oklahoma on Saturday. These are two really good basketball teams. This is almost like a preview to a March Madness matchup, maybe Sweet 16 matchup or something.
Hmm.
You've got Alabama as a 1 point favorite on the road. And I mean, to me, I know you love this Alabama team, and I do too. But what do you think? I mean, Oklahoma just took out Texas. That was a big win for them. I know Shaka
Yes.
Smart wasn't on the sidelines, but you still like Alabama in this matchup.
I do. Yeah, I think you made a good selection here.
Hmm.
Um, I've got in my numbers Alabama is a little over 4 points the superior team in this one,
Hmm.
and I think that they're going to have a pretty big advantage on offense. The Oklahoma Sooners defense quite doesn't quite match up like they do on the other side, and I think that Alabama will be able to get points of plenty in this one. And I think that Oklahoma will score too. I wrote in here that I do like the over as
Hmm.
well, 147, but I can endorse your roll tide pick.
Roll Tide. Also, this would be an excellent football game typically too.
Yeah,
So I kind of wish they had this in college football too. This SEC Big 12 Challenge every
that
year.
would be cool.
So the next game is Tennessee, who is going to host Kansas. This is also on Saturday. I should have said the first game is at 11 o'clock in the morning. You got on Central. You got to get up early, and then Tennessee. It's a 5 o'clock game. You're showing Tennessee as a 2 point favorite at home. Now Kansas technically is better in most of like Ken Palm's metrics, but they're very close. But I do like the Vols here. Their defense is really good, and even though the Jayhawks are a balanced team, I just like this Tennessee team, especially at home. Can you get on board with me?
Yeah, I think so. I like the Volunteers as well. They're one of the best teams in the SEC. Them and Alabama are probably the two favorites to win the conference right now.
Right.
And I do think that they're a superior squad here. I've got about a half point difference, but the key for me here for Tennessee is on the defensive side of the ball. They're number two ranked in defensive efficiency,
Right.
and I think that they'll be able to stop the Kansas attack. So I agree. I like this pick as well.
Nice. Well, we are going to mention this game, but skip it again because UCLA was going to play Oregon as a makeup game at 4 o'clock Central on Monday, but apparently it's been rescheduled again because we think it's the Ducks that are hit by COVID. So TBD when this game's going to be played. So let's jump to the last game on the card here, which I don't know if we guess we don't have a line yet, but Baylor and Texas. I saw this is supposed to be played on Tuesday. I guess this must be a rescheduled game because I didn't see a time on it, but
Okay.
I thought it was a big game to mention if they are going to play it. And I know you love Baylor, and we've talked a lot about them, but Texas is definitely that team that can stand up to them this year. What do you think about this matchup action?
I can't wait to watch it. And let's see, you have Baylor on the road at Texas or vice
I
versa?
had Baylor at Texas. Let me see if
Okay.
that's accurate, according to
Yeah.
my.
It does appear Ken Palm has it on the schedule, which of course
Mhm.
is gospel to us college basketball bettors.
That's right.
And Ken Palm shows
Say
Baylor as a 5 point fave in this game.
it.
So
Ooh.
if it's okay with you for this synopsis, I think we could go with a five.
Okay.
And um, let me correct myself. You like Baylor in the matchup?
Well, I wanted to talk about it. I didn't know the
Okay.
line. I, you
Okay.
know, I would tend to in this situation with 5 points probably go with Texas, but I know
Mhm.
Baylor has covered every game except for one against Kansas this year, right? This team is just a covering machine.
Yeah, they are indeed. And as you may remember from earlier in our discussion, I have them head and shoulders above the rest of the NCAA.
You
And
do.
I show them as a 10 point victor in
Woo!
this one based on my algorithm. And I have no interest in getting in front of Baylor right now. So if I were to pick this game at five, I would definitely be on that side.
Right, right. I mean, I don't know when you pulled your numbers, but I pulled Ken Palm's numbers on Tuesday. Baylor, just so you know, is number one in defensive efficiency, number three in offensive efficiency.
Hmm.
They're really stinking good. I mean, Texas is good. They're 16 on offense and 8 on defense, but when you stack those teams up, I mean, I was wondering actually with Ken Palm specifically, how the hell are the Zags better? I mean, the Zags are 2 on offense and 11 on defense. I don't really know the math there, but Baylor is, I know that they beat them head to head earlier this year, right? But
Hmm.
is that true? They played earlier this year?
They did. No, it was scheduled, but it got canceled because
Oh,
of COVID.
okay. Okay, my bad.
So
But,
hopefully we can
but
see them
anyway,
play later.
so you definitely would have Baylor, go Bears. Those
I do.
guys.
I mean, to be honest with you, if there's any team in the Big 12 that matches up with them, it's Texas.
Hmm,
Baylor's number one 3-point offensive field goal percentage, 44%, which is like almost Steph Curry territory.
sure.
And Texas does have a pretty good 3-point defense, 20th ranked. So
Right.
they certainly might be able to slow them down on that side of the ball. And as I'm talking about this game, I'm kind of liking the under a little bit. I think that
Okay.
you may see a little bit more of a slogfest in this one.
Okay. Sounds good. I just wonder too, not that, coaching is a really tough thing. In college basketball, it probably, I would say, I mean, obviously, like Nick Saban's a god of, college football, but I do believe the coach makes more of a difference in college basketball than any other sport that we talk about,
Mm-hmm.
at least,
Mm-hmm.
more than college football, more than pro football, because in game, the motivation, the decision making, and obviously, I mean, there's certainly motivation coming up to the game, but to me, the in-game adjustments have to be on the fly, and that's when that coach matters. And we've talked about this on other episodes that for Final Four stuff, you almost have to have an incredible coach. I mean, even if they have great talent, they never can go win 6 games without having great coaching.
Yep.
So, when I look at this situation, Shaka Smart, I don't know if he's going to be back or not for this matchup. He was the one who tested positive for COVID,
Mm.
and they did miss a couple guys for tracing purposes against Oklahoma. So that obviously would factor into my handicap, looking at betting that game next week. But we'll see. It should be a hell of a game, like you said. And for right now, I guess I'll be on your Baylor -5. But if I see a bigger number, I might just jump on Texas then.
May I ask you, how do you rate Scott Drew as a head coach in terms of your college basketball coaching hierarchy?
It's really interesting. I think he's a good coach. I've never thought of him as an amazing coach, right? But why? He's put together some really good teams. They've done well. When you look at like the bigger programs out there, like the Mark Fews or stuff, I don't consider Few an excellent coach. I think he's a great recruiter,
Yeah.
right? Whereas, the Izzos of the world, you've dog coached K in the past. I know you really liked his tirade last week. But but we've talked about Chris Beard as an excellent
Yeah.
coach, and he's proved it. I think Calipari is actually a great coach too, both in game and recruiting. So I would say right now he's got to be probably top 10 in the top 10. I wouldn't put him in the top 5.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure about you. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think that Scott Drew, for me, it doesn't really blow me away based on the in-game scenarios that I've seen,
Right.
mostly predominantly in the NCAA tournament, because I think that
Right.
in those high leverage situations is where you really see the coaching shine.
Right.
And for me, Scott Drew just hasn't really done it to a level that would have me as a top 20 coach even. So
Right.
just
Right.
curious your thoughts. I think we're on
Yeah,
the
we'll
same
just
page.
see when it comes. I used to love Shaka. I thought Shaka was the best at VCU. I'm just an incredible coach, and he has really struggled at Texas. In fact, I was shocked he wasn't fired last year. Maybe COVID helped him because he wasn't because they weren't going to make the tournament. And then this year, bam, he's got this amazing team. He's had talent on that team before, but now they're finally buying in. I'm not sure. Maybe it's the hair. You talked about that last time,
It's
the
there.
COVID hair. So, but yeah, anyway, great matchups to watch this weekend. So I'm excited and definitely getting more into college hoops every
All
week
right.
now. Action. So I'll be doing my own bracketology starting next week, and I'm so excited. So
Wegs, I'll tell you, I'm growing out my locks just to become a better
yeah,
handicapper. So
is that it? That's it. Okay. I go COVID hair every time anyway. It doesn't help my handicapping. So,
Yeah, right.
anyway, well, great, man. Well, let's everybody out there who listens, who's religious with us, thank you so much for your listens. Like us on the podcast. We never say this. Like us on the podcast. Like us on YouTube if you watch. Tell your friends, tell grandma, tell everybody about us. We need the help. And just mention it again, it's a little plug. We are going to be out there, even with the shifted schedule. We'll be out in Vegas for the first weekend of the tournament. If you're out there, let us know. We definitely want to hang out. We'll be at the Stadium Swim on Friday. So exciting times.
Yeah, Stadium Swim's not ready for us.
That's right. Well, hey, follow me at Wegspool on Twitter and Instagram. Follow us at Site Action Pod on Twitter and YouTube.
Follow me on Twitter at 31S Roberts.
All right. Thanks, everybody.